In the winter of 1983, a quiet Pennsylvania town witnessed something so impossible, even police officers refused to talk about it for years. A young inmate named Don Decker stepped out of jail on a simple furlough and walked straight into one of the most disturbing paranormal cases in American history. Within hours, it began to rain indoors where he was staying. Rain that fell sideways, rose upward, and drenched entire rooms without a single drop falling outside. Crucifixes burned, objects moved on their own, and every witness claimed the same chilling thing. The storm was following him. Tonight we're reopening the files on a demonic event that should not exist, an event documented by civilians, clergy, and law enforcement alike. This is the terrifying haunting of Don Decker, also known as the demonic Rainman. We will not only revisit the original case itself, but I will be providing details and updates that are new or were missed in the original. So grab a drink or a snack, cozy up with a Mystery Archives blanket, and decide for yourself if the devil really visited Pennsylvania all those years ago.
Can death unleash something into this world that isn't supposed to be here? Could it act like a portal, allowing something sinister and dark to creep in just before it closes, especially if the person passing is harboring dark and abhorrent secrets? When a young man begins to exhibit strange and demonic behavior, and the very laws of nature seem to bend to his will, can a reverend work to save his very soul? Documented by multiple law enforcement professionals as unexplained to this day, this is certainly not a story you will want to miss. This is the untold story of Don Decker, also known as the Rainman of Pennsylvania. The date is February 24th, 1983. And on this cold, misty day, a family is mourning the loss of their loved one, a man by the name of James Kishaw. After battling alcoholism for many years, the bottle finally took its toll and caused cirrhosis of the liver, which became fatal. Among the pews of friends and family paying their respects sits a young man, the grandson of James, 21-year-old Don Decker. Don had been granted furlough from his 4 to 12-month jail sentence for receiving stolen property in order to attend the funeral. But as he sat facing the body of his grandfather, as others paid their last respects and gave glowing speeches about the man, Don clenched his fists. Only he harbored a dark secret that no one else knew, and this secret is perhaps what contributed to his troubled adolescence. When it was his turn to walk up and say goodbye to James, as he stood over his body, the face of evil looked back at him with eyes closed for the first time. Don would later say, "It felt like good triumphing over evil that day, and I truly felt like everything was going to get better, like it was a turning point in my life." The secret that he had been holding on to for so long was that James, his very own grandfather, had abused him from the time he was 7 years old until he was a teenager, and no one else knew. All the years of pain and fear were caused by that man, the very same that now laid in the coffin, the very same that Don was now having to hear others praise, and who he was publicly obligated to mourn. At the conclusion of the funeral, when James' casket was laid into its final resting place, he couldn't stand the way his parents had glorified the man's memory. But given the circumstances he was in, furloughed from jail and with emotions raw amongst everybody, he decided it would be for the best to go and stay the night with some family friends instead, before he was set to return to finish out his sentence. Bob and Jeannie Kiefer were longtime friends of the family and were quite fond of Don, so they were more than happy to have him join them for the night. As the night progressed, the three of them were enjoying each other's company, but it seemed like all the feelings that had been stirred up from the memories of his grandfather's abuse at the funeral were coming back to haunt Don. He felt on edge and uneasy when suddenly the air around him vibrated with a bone-deep chill. Almost simultaneously after this occurred, water began to drip from the ceiling and down the living room walls. Don then fell into an eerie, trance-like state, staring at nothing and yet everything at the same time. The Kiefers were perplexed at what was happening and tried examining all reasonable possibilities. Thinking they had a leak, they contacted their landlord, a man named Ron Van Wy. Upon arriving, Ron too quickly became perplexed. The leak, or so they thought, was obvious, but what was strange to him was that there was no piping that ran through the front part of the house, certainly none that could spring a leak from the ceiling or the walls, none at all. On top of this strangeness, when observing the water's direction, Ron noticed that there was indeed no sense of direction. The water was not only coming from the top down, from the ceiling and the walls, but it was going from the floor and up the walls, in direct contradiction to the laws of gravity and to anything that he had ever seen. Shocked and needing multiple witnesses to assure himself that he wasn't crazy, Ron phoned his wife Romaine to come and take a look as well. Upon her arrival, she was just as perplexed and became scared at what was happening, since it defied all logic, and the leak, or so they thought, only became worse. So the landlords did the only thing that they could do. They called the police. Shortly after that call, a patrol car arrived with Officer John Beaujean, who after briefly stepping inside the home became drenched in water, and also witnessed the bizarre, otherworldly activity to which he had no explanation for either. So to prove his sanity and to back up a report, he called upon his partner, an officer named Richard Volbert. When Richard arrived, he wanted to be briefed on exactly what was going on, but Beaujean didn't want to give him any sort of a preconceived notion, and just told him to trust him on this one. After some back and forth, Richard finally conceded and followed John into the Kiefer residence. He would later describe the incident as so. I walked in the door. I couldn't have gotten 2 steps in the door, and I was pelted by water. As we were discussing a potential leak, and as we were being told that there were no pipes in that part of the house, as we stood just inside the house, a droplet of water was traveling horizontally and passed right between us and out into the next room. As I retell this story, I have a chill up my spine and the hair on my neck is standing up. John would go on to say, things were happening in this house that I couldn't have ever possibly dreamed of happening, and there was no way to explain what was going on. Shocked by what they were witnessing, the 2 officers asked the family to step outside of the house and out of the water while they left to report the incident to the chief himself. The Wise decided to stay at the property while the Kiefers and Don walked across the street to a local restaurant for something to eat. Within seconds of everyone departing, the water suddenly stopped within the house. And aside from the home being drenched, it was back to normal. No more dripping water and no more mist. This left Ron and his wife only to speculate that whatever was happening was coming from one of the 3, because when they left, so did it. Pam Scrofano, who owned the pizzeria opposite the Kiefers' house, where the 3 ended up in, was a friend of the Kiefers and knew Don as well. Upon greeting the 3 of them, she noticed that Don was distant, like he was looking at you, but looking through you. A deeply religious woman, she sensed something evil about him. like the devil was working through Don Decker, and recommended that they contact someone at the church for help. Within mere seconds of mentioning this, droplets of water hit the table in front of them, and soon the very same phenomena that was originally happening in the house was also now taking place inside the pizzeria. Sensing this evil, Pam ran to the cash register where she had an old cross necklace. She took it out and placed it around Don's neck. As soon as it touched his skin, he got burned. He began to scream and pulled the necklace off of him. It was charred black. As the trio departed the pizzeria and headed back to their home, the strange activity inside once again ceased. It's important to note that nothing like this had ever happened at the Kiefer residence or Pam's pizzeria. No plumbing issues, nothing that could be considered even remotely similar. Convening inside the home once again, they met Ron and his wife. Ron suspected that Don had something to do with what was happening, and after some discussion, an argument erupted among the group. This led to Jeannie screaming at Don, telling him that they knew it was him, and that he had to make all of this stop. After the words left her mouth, the pots and pans above the stove began to shake, and the lights around them began to flicker. Don Decker was no longer in control of his body. Everyone watched in horror as Don levitated multiple feet into the air and rotated several times. He was then thrown out of the kitchen where they were and into an entirely different room. Don himself would later recount the event like this. It wasn't like someone grabbing your hand or picking you up. I felt this force over my entire body. I'm a big man and I've always been assertive, but this, whatever this was, made me feel like a newborn child. I'm scared right now just thinking about it. Don now laid unconscious on the floor, and the rain began again. The Wise and the Kiefers were in absolute shock and disbelief at what had just taken place. They knew it was tied to Don, but they had no idea just what it was. But they felt that it was evil. A few hours after the strange incident witnessed by the police officers, they arrived back at the residence alongside their very heated police chief. As he made his way into the home with the two officers behind him, he too was pelted with water just as they had been. And at first, probably feeling like he was on the spot and perhaps slightly embarrassed, he claimed that this wasn't even a police issue, but a plumbing issue, despite then being told that there were no pipes in that part of the house, and this was even confirmed by blueprints of the home. After taking a look around at the rest of the home, which was bone dry, the chief then angrily ordered the two officers to escort him back home. He would be the only officer that night to not admit to anything strange happening. He then directed officers John and Richard to not file a report and to not speak about the incident at all, but word would get out. The following morning, acting against the specific orders from their chief, the two officers returned to the residence, along with 3 veteran officers as well. They too would see and experience the bizarre rain inside the home, so they decided to try something to attempt to get to the bottom of what exactly was going on. They asked if they could place a paper bag over Don's head, to which Don agreed. This was so he would have no way of seeing anything. He'd have no preconceived notions of what could be placed on him or in his hands. They then placed a gold cross necklace from one of the officers into his hand. Lieutenant William Davies, one of the officers present who placed the cross into his hand, described the incident like this. As soon as the necklace touched his palm, he said it burnt him. He would have had no idea what it was. I saw what I believed to be smoke of some sort coming from the necklace or his hand. As he dropped the necklace, I picked it up, and it was hot. not burning hot, but hot enough to concern me. Then, suddenly, with the force as if a bus hit him, he lifted up and was thrown across the room, hitting the back wall. Upon removing the bag from him, he was clearly dazed and had 3 bloody and fresh claw marks across his neck. I've been a cop for 40 years, and I've never ran into anything like this, ever. Never before, and never again after. There's always an explanation, but in this case, there was no explanation. The police would later leave again with no answers as to what was taking place, believing it to be a spiritual matter. Dawn was placed on the couch in the living room, where the rain continued to go from mist to showers at random and varying times. After making multiple desperate calls to every Protestant and Catholic religious leader in Stroudsburg, only one didn't turn them down. Ron was able to convince an evangelical preacher who went by the name of Reverend Johnson to come over and pray with Dawn. As she arrived and began to pray, the rest of the group held hands in vigil and did what they could to support her. As the first words left her lips, Dawn began to convulse and shake. The rain intensified, and his body began to twist into unnatural positions. But as she continued, he slowly but surely began to relax, and the rain seemed to stop. Although those present believed that a miracle had been performed, the results of that prayer session would only prove temporary, perhaps placing into hibernation whatever was inside Don Decker. Once his furlough was over, Don Decker returned back to jail to finish his sentence, and within just a few days, the mysterious rain returned. Upon his return to jail, Don was placed in a cell with another inmate and had the thought enter his mind that if he could make it rain in the cell, perhaps he could get to be alone. Almost as soon as he thought that, the rain began. It was materializing out of the concrete floor and flowing upward. The other inmate was horrified and screamed for the guards to let him out. Thinking they had some kind of plumbing issue, the guards opened the cell and removed that inmate as well as Decker. At first, he was accused of throwing water onto the walls from the sink or from the toilet by the guards, but upon these accusations, Don rebutted with, "I can control it." This time, the feeling was different. This time, he felt powerful and in control. Upon hearing this, the guard laughed and said, "If you can control this rain, make it rain in the warden's office," an offer that Don couldn't refuse. The warden would then describe what happened, and these are the words of Lieutenant Warden David Keenhold. "I was in my office filling out paperwork with no one else around. It was approximately 8 p.m. in the evening. I didn't notice it at that time, but my shirt was dripping down. I heard a knock at the door, and little did I know that it was the same officer that was just with Don Decker. I wasn't aware of the situation at the time. He told me to look at my shirt, and there was no explanation as to where the water could have come from. The officer then became very frightened of what had happened, and after explaining the situation to me, I too became frightened. Shortly after the rain in the warden's office, a frantic call was placed to a local chaplain, a man named Reverend William Blackburn. He soon found himself shaking hands with the warden and several officers as he was escorted into the jail and into an empty cell. Within minutes, he came face to face with Don Decker, who by this time was beginning to fear the feeling he had inside of him. That powerful and evil feeling. He was now asking for the Reverend's help in freeing him of whatever this thing was. Blackburn wasn't convinced at first. He told Decker that his life would be much easier if he just stopped all this nonsense and attention-seeking. He would go on later to describe the situation like this. "Almost immediately after I accused him, Don's demeanor changed. A glazed look came over him, and a horrible smell entered the room. Doctors, nurses, and medical personnel will tell you that when you walk into a room when there's someone dying of disease or of cancer, there's a smell to it. I smelled that smell, multiplied by at least 5 times. It was evil and foreboding. Don's glazed expression then switched to one of malice and calculation. He exclaimed, "I have powers that you don't, and I can make it rain." He then raised his hand and rubbed his fingers together, and it started to rain inside that cell. It was like a devil's rain, a mist. I was in the presence of evil. I started opening my Bible to begin to pray, and Don said, "I don't want you to pray for me," to which I decided to anyways. I started to read to him, and the strange thing is that even though I was soaked, the pages of my Bible never got wet, and that was truly frightening. Although the session was short, upon uttering the words that he was now bound in the name of Jesus Christ, the rain stopped, and a peace overtook Don. When he finally came to, he thanked the Reverend with tears in his eyes, and the two hugged and prayed together. Again, in the words of Reverend Blackburn, "There is no doubt in my mind that he was possessed. No human being could do what he did in that room. There is no way that he did anything to fool me whatsoever. Whatever happened was spiritual, and it was not from God. I can guarantee you that it was not from God." From this moment forward, the rain has stopped, for now. Don Decker would later say that he takes things day by day, and that fortunately, the rain hasn't returned. As for his grandfather, he thinks whatever happened was related to him. He thinks that considering where he thinks he ended up, maybe he was able to make a deal with someone and have yet another chance to abuse him. What makes this case so unique and interesting is that all the people involved are credible people. I mean, we have some family friends, sure, but they stated they had nothing take place in that house prior to Don's arrival that morning. We have the landlord of the family's home and his wife not only reaffirming that there weren't any prior issues, but that there were no pipes in that area of the house. We then have 6 police officers, including the chief over the case, experience the phenomena, and he was the only one that said that nothing took place. We have a business owner where the phenomena took place at her establishment as well. Then several guards at the jail, in which he goes back to finish serving his time, witness things, and the warden of the jail himself. And the police officers, 3 of them were seasoned lieutenants, I might add, and anyone with a proper reputation, unless they really experienced something, would risk that, in my opinion. So was it demonic infestation, possession, poltergeist activity, or something else entirely? When we have so many credible eyewitnesses recanting the same details, saying what they saw, experienced, and felt was a phenomena not of this world, it truly makes you wonder. And if it wasn't spiritual, could Don's childhood trauma have allowed him to break into a part of the mind that could somehow cause these kinds of things? Allow him to manipulate the weather of his surroundings, move objects, and even cause harm to himself? We may never truly know the answers to this mystery in particular, and it very much still is a mystery to this day.
I originally covered this case back in February of 2023, and I remember being perplexed just by the sheer amount of strange activity surrounding this man, for all intents and purposes, who seemed to be troubled, but a mostly normal individual. These are some of the updates and details that I might not have covered in the original video. Over the years, the Don Decker case has remained a subject of debate among paranormal enthusiasts and skeptics alike. In the early 2010s, renewed attention came when New Zealand sociologist Robert Bartholomew investigated the rainman claims. Bartholomew offered natural explanations in a 2013 report, suggesting that the indoor rain might have been caused by an ice damming effect, or water leakage after a snowmelt refreezes on a roof, coinciding with Decker's emotional stress. He noted that weather records at the time showed conditions favorable to ice dam formation, which could explain water seeping into the house naturally. Bartholomew and other skeptics also questioned why no one captured photos or videos of the phenomena if it truly occurred. Nonetheless, many of the original witnesses, including law enforcement officers, stand by their accounts, maintaining that an unknown supernatural force was at work. This mix of belief and skepticism has kept the case alive as a topic of discussion. For example, local media ran a feature in 2013 highlighting the skeptics' viewpoint on Stroudsburg's infamous Devil's Tale, and the story continues to be revisited in podcasts, blogs, and paranormal forums into the 2020s. Even decades later, Don Decker's Weekends of Devil's Reign is frequently cited as one of the modern era's most puzzling alleged poltergeist cases. However, following the case, the most significant public news update on Don Decker came about 30 years after the paranormal events themselves. In October of 2012, Decker, who was then in his early 50s, was arrested on federal arson charges in Pennsylvania. Investigators alleged that a restaurant owner in Tobyhanna hired Decker to burn down his business for the insurance money. According to federal prosecutors, Theodoros Karikiopoulos, the owner of Dana's Restaurant and Tavern, agreed to pay Decker $25,000 to set the place on fire as part of the insurance fraud scheme. Decker reportedly turned himself into authorities in late 2012, once charged. Local news outlets, noting his infamous past, even headlined him as the Rainman, charged with arson during the coverage of the case. This twist was met with astonishment in both paranormal and local communities. The man known by mysterious indoor rain was now accused of intentionally setting a building ablaze. Court records and news reports indicated that Decker was released on bail after surrendering to police. If convicted on the arson conspiracy, he faced a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison. The case proceeded in federal court in 2013, and notably, the restaurant owner ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to prison for the arson for hire plot. Decker's own outcome, however, received less media attention, suggesting that he likely took a plea deal in order to avoid a high-profile trial. As of December 2025, there's little publicly available information about Don Decker's personal status or whereabouts. There's no major news outlets reporting on him since the resolution to his arson case was in 2012 to 2013, and it's unclear whether Decker served a prison term, and if so, how long. Those details were not widely reported. There are no recent appearances or interviews by Decker in any media. And in fact, local discussion threads have occasionally inquired if he's still alive or where he might be living, but no definitive answers have surfaced. However, I can tell you that there is no obituary or death notice for Don Decker, so he is presumed to be alive and likely in his mid-60s by now, living a private life out of the spotlight. Given his low profile, some paranormal enthusiasts have mused that Decker may prefer to avoid publicity, especially after the unwanted fame from both the haunting claims and the criminal charges. Whether you believe Don Decker was a troubled young man caught in coincidence or a vessel for something far darker, one thing remains undeniable. Dozens of credible witnesses all saw the same impossible storm unfold, the storm that vanished the moment that Decker left the room, and has never been replicated since. So ask yourself, now that we've covered all the bases, did the devil truly visit Pennsylvania? Or was the devil just confusion, misinterpretation, or ignorance? The answers may never truly be clear, but all we can do is try and decipher the truth of the fog of uncertainty that shrouds this story. Thank you guys so much for watching this revisited and updated case video of mine. I really and truly appreciate it. I've been revisiting these stories not only for my own curiosity to see what I can find, but it's allowed me to revisit my roots of the channel, and I think ultimately will make my new content for years to come much better. So please like the video if you liked it, comment down below letting me know your thoughts on the case, hype it if you can, and subscribe if you haven't already. All those things help me out tremendously. You can also pick up any of my 4 books or merchandise at mysteryarchives.myshopify.com. And if you'd like to further support my work and gain access to all my content ad-free, please visit and consider joining at patreon.com/mysteryarchives. With all that being said, guys, I have a ton of content planned for you this month, so please stay tuned, and I will see you guys again very soon. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Make sure to please stay safe out there from demonic rain, arson, and more. And I'll see you next time. Take care.